Okay. Hey, everyone. My name's Allie Grasgreen. I'm a reporter. I cover higher ed at Politico Pro in Washington. And I'm here with University of St. Thomas professor Buffy Smith and Greg Walton from Stanford. And we are going to be talking about mentoring and psychological interventions for at-risk students. Sorry. I don't do this very often, if you can't tell. We're talking about mentoring and psychological interventions to boost academic success for at-risk students. So we know that minority, low-income, and first-generation students are less likely to graduate and continue in college than their more privileged peers. And while they might be equally academically capable, there's a lot of new research showing that they're facing unique psychological barriers, such as like a lack of confidence and a lack of sense of belonging, and just not really having the social capital and resources to seek help or don't know how. And that there's something that we can actually do to help them overcome those barriers. And so looking beyond remedial courses and other academic interventions at psychological ones. And so Buffy and Greg are going to spend a few minutes each talking about their specific research in this area, and then we'll go into questions.
I'm going to use this microphone. Is this okay? Okay. First, I want to let you know that I'm truly honored to be here today. I want to thank Michael and the fine EWA staff for inviting me. Thank you so much. And I'm certainly honored to be here with a great scholar, Greg. I admire his work. And I am thrilled to have the moderator, Allie. So thank you. But I think I feel like some of my students sometimes in terms of when they're doing presentations, because I'm like, wow, I'll be with education reporters. So I'm a little nervous, but excited to be with you all. And I do want to say thank you so much for your dedication and your commitment to studying and covering issues that are important in education. So why is mentoring important? How does it relate to academic success? Well, the research indicates that mentors can play a critical role in students' academic achievement. Mentors are important in terms of helping students thrive, not just survive, but thrive in college. And in order for students to actually thrive in college, they need to have a mastery of both the formal curriculum and the hidden curriculum. Now, we all know that the formal curriculum is simply defined as those written norms and expectations of college. The formal curriculum is transparent, is accessible to all students. You find it in the student handbook, on a syllabus. For example, students might need 8 credits to graduate, or 8 credits in English to graduate. It's pretty clear, pretty accessible. So that's the formal curriculum. But the hidden curriculum is those unwritten, often unspoken norms, values, expectations, behavior codes of conduct, the rules of higher education that's not transparent or accessible to all students. Well, how do you help students master that? They need mentors. They need mentors who will serve as co-translators of the university culture. These mentors are critical for the overall academic achievement of students. The hidden curriculum, give you an example, we expect our students to demonstrate active engagement in the learning process. But how do they demonstrate that? We expect them to pose questions that will reflect their intellectual curiosity. Yet, they have to make sure they don't ask questions that will actually be interpreted by their instructors as challenging their authority or questioning their teacher's competency. Now, you might argue, well, that's common sense, Buff. If they make it through K through 12, surely they know the difference between the two types of questions. But we have to be mindful that common sense is still culturally bound. And common sense is common to those who are familiar with the particular cultural context. But if these are first-generation low-income students, some cultural norms of the university setting is unfamiliar territory for them. So they need mentors to help them understand those cultural nuances that they'll face in their different academic and social settings on campus. Not only are mentors critical in terms of helping students understand the hidden curriculum, but mentors are important in terms of helping students develop and build social capital with faculty, administrators, staff, and peers. Social capital refers to that knowledge, the information, those resources, those opportunities that are transmitted within the relationship. In terms of building social capital, students need to understand how creating meaningful relationships with their teacher can actually lead to internship opportunities, stronger letters of recommendation. It's critical for their success. Now, if they don't have that understanding growing up in terms of their family background, because they're the first in their family to attend college, then they're going to rely on mentors a lot to teach them that knowledge. But when we look at mentoring and how it's done on most campuses, we find that we do a very good job at advising. But if we really want to help students have equal access to the hidden curriculum, we have to move beyond advising. At advising level, it's important, but it's not enough. Let me give you an example. If you have a student named Alex, Alex fails his first math exam. Alex comes to me as his mentor. I'll tell Alex, Alex, you should go talk to your professor. Find out what you did wrong in that class. She will help you prepare for your next exam. That's good advice. That's what most mentors do in terms of the advising cycle, but that's not enough. Then if I wanted to actually do more intense mentoring, maybe I'll do advocacy. And maybe I'll actually contact Alice's math teacher and find out what would be some testing strategies that she would recommend I could tell Alex that would help prepare him for his next exam. That's advocacy. I'm utilizing my social capital on behalf of Alex. But once again, that's not good enough, because I need to prepare Alex to develop his own social capital with his math teacher. So the most intensive form of mentoring is at the apprenticeship cycle. Now, this will require for Alex and I to meet, do role-playing exercises, to talk about what he should say, how he should say it, even practice those nonverbal expressions when he's talking with his professor about the math exam. And I would need to practice this over and over again with Alex until he is comfortable and confident that he can actually be in the room with his teacher to talk about these issues. The apprenticeship cycle is a continuous process of showing and modeling for students what they should do. And then I need to follow up with Alex, because I need to know, how did that meeting go with the math professor? And then once again, we'll do some more role-playing exercises to find out what worked well during the meeting and what are some things we still need to work on together to make that meeting more productive the next time because we have to send Alex again to meet with his math teacher, to continue to build social capital with her, even when he's not in a crisis mode. One simple way of thinking about the mentoring cycles is to think of advising as telling a student what to do. Once again, universities, we do that pretty well. Advocacy. This is where we will actually now advocate and do things on behalf of the student. And that's good. But ultimately, we need to move toward apprenticeship. And that is empowering students by showing them how to do things for themselves. When you think about the challenges that we have in terms of higher ed, we know that if colleges and universities are committed to helping underrepresented students thrive in college, they could do this if they explicitly teach students the knowledge and skills that they need to master the hidden curriculum and build social capital. And they could do this by restructuring their existing academic support programs. We have fine teaching institutions. We have great research institutions. But in higher ed, we also need more mentoring institutions.
I want to, it's been a long afternoon. We've heard a lot of stuff, so I'm going to start off with something a little bit different than what we've done so far. All of us have gone to college in one form or another at one time or another. And I just want to start by asking each of you, to perhaps put down the electronics and take out a piece of paper. And we'll take just maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute, and think about something that was really hard for you your freshman year of college, something that was difficult, something that made you question whether or not that was going to be a good experience for you, a specific moment, a specific doubt, something that happened that was hard, that was difficult, that made you question your place at whatever institution you were at. And I'm just going to be silent for a little bit. I know we could probably spend a lot longer thinking about this, but our time is limited. How many of you were able to think of something? You can raise your hands. And how many of you thought of something where you felt maybe lonely or isolated, not connected to others? A good number. Does anybody have a short one that they'd like to share? Sure, in the back, yeah. Yeah, she says that she met with an advisor who gave her a list of prearranged classes that she was supposed to take, no choice at all. Is there any, maybe one more quick one that somebody would like to share? Yeah, I'm going to give you the mic.
Sure. My first day of class in college, my father had a massive heart attack, and I didn't know where to go for support.
So that sounds like a very, very strong and awful incident. The one that comes to my mind is a much smaller one. It is smaller, it would seem, but it meant a lot to me. My freshman dorm, somebody came and spoke to it and said, "Oh, you're in your freshman year of college, you're all going to college, you're in your freshman year. These are the people you're going to be friends with for life. These are going to be your friends for life." And I thought, I don't know, what do I know? I mean, I'm a freshman. I like my friends from high school a lot, but I don't know these people. And that set me off on the whole wrong path, because that group of people in my freshman dorm was, not going to actually be my friends for life. Now, I think when we go to college, it's sort of a coming-of-age ritual in America now. It's what we do when we come of age, and we all go through difficulties. We all have these different kinds of worries and struggles in coming to college. And these worries can crystallize in several different kinds of toxic worries, toxic thoughts that go through our minds. Worries like social belonging, worries about if I feel lonely, if I feel isolated in college, does it mean I just don't belong in general in this college? Does it mean I just don't belong in general in any college? Worries about fixed beliefs. Sorry, this is not appearing that clearly. Worries about fixed beliefs about intelligence. If I fail that chem test, does it mean I'm just stupid? Does it mean I'm just dumb at chem? Does it mean I can't ever succeed in chemistry? Now, these worries that we all experience, these adversities that we all encounter, they are common and they can take on special meaning when we're going into settings where our group is in some way disadvantaged, when we're going into environments where our group is outnumbered and underrepresented, when our group faces negative stereotypes. This is a quote from a woman we all know, who writes, "My experience," this is from her senior thesis at Princeton University written in the mid-'80s. "My experiences at Princeton have made me far more aware of my blackness than ever before. No matter how liberal and open-minded some of my white professors and classmates try to be toward me, I sometimes feel like a visitor on campus, as if I really don't belong. It often seems as if to them I'll always be black first and a student second." This is our First Lady. This is Michelle Robinson Obama writing in 1985. Now, if students, let me just back up quickly. The consequence of this kind of worry, this pervasive worry about whether I belong, is very specific and very important. What it does is it gives students a lens for interpreting the stuff that happens to them. So if you're walking around campus wondering, I don't know if I belong, and I don't know if people like me belong, and something bad happens, like you get criticized, or you feel excluded, or you feel lonely, it gets very easy to see that event as meaning that you don't belong in general, and you're not going to be able to belong in the future. So what our interventions try to do is give students a kind of adaptive psychological roadmap for understanding difficulties that everybody's going to go through in one form or another in college, and how they can overcome those difficulties with time. It's a kind of psychological roadmap. The goal is to help students anticipate challenges before they happen and help them anticipate the ways that they can overcome those challenges. And we give them this idea through stories from upperclassmen about going through challenges in college. And you can do this, you can deliver these kinds of stories at a full institutional scale to an entire incoming college class before they get to campus prior to college matriculation. We've tested this 3 times, and I'm just going to show you really quickly the data from these 3 trials. It won't take long, the primary data, and then we'll begin the discussion. So the first trial was conducted with a high school charter network in Philadelphia, Mastery Charter Schools, with a large group of collaborators. Students completed the intervention in their high school computer labs prior to going to college. All of these students were college admitted. They're predominantly African-American first-generation students. They completed a saying is believing exercise, so they read stories from upperclassmen, from college students about the difficulties in the transition to college, and then they wrote an essay about how and why people's experience of going to college might be like this. What kinds of challenges do people encounter, and how do they overcome those challenges with time? So this is one girl's story. Can we get the lights? Thanks. The initial worries about belonging in college are likely to go away over time. Once the student becomes involved in social groups on campus that interest them and later found friends, the same friends. Sorry, I can't even read this. Also, when students understand that they go to office hours and meet with their professor to discuss a question, they feel that the professors are there for them and they want them to succeed. Initial feelings will also go away after learning more about the campus. For example, a student might go on campus not knowing where they are, and once they realize where they are, they're more likely to feel at home. We can have the lights back. Thanks. Sorry, the background isn't opaque the way it's supposed to be. So they do this to script for themselves the ways in which challenges arise and can be overcome. Here's the effects on full-time college enrollment the next year in 70-plus colleges, 2- and 4-year schools. In the randomized control condition, 32% of students stayed full-time enrolled the next year. In the treatment condition, 43% of students were full-time enrolled, an 11% increase from the prior year in this population. The second trial is from a landmark public university in the great state of Texas. And in this trial, the intervention was delivered by the college in materials sent out to students, like alongside housing preference forms and health insurance forms prior to college matriculation. Here's the effects on first full-time enrollment in the first semester, and we're looking at the 2,400 plus African American, Latino, and first-generation students. In the prior 2 years, this number was 83%. In the control condition, this number was 82%. And in 3 different kinds of interventions, all of which gave students these stories about challenges in coming to college and how they could be overcome, it increased to 86, 87%, and that's about a 50% reduction in the group disparity in enrollment in the next term. Third trial at a selective private institution. Again, the intervention was delivered alongside other pre-matriculation materials. And here, there's not a dropout problem, but there's a GPA gap between at-risk ethnic minority students and first-generation students and continuing generation white and Asian students. What we see is that there's no effect for advantaged students, but for disadvantaged students, as compared to both the prior 2 years and the randomized control condition, there's about a 0.1 GPA boost, and that, again, significantly reduces the achievement gap. I just want to mark 3 subtleties that are important and are easily missed. These interventions are not magic. They are well-timed and well-delivered to clear away psychological barriers like the worry, maybe I don't belong here, so that students can go ahead and actually take advantage of resources and learning opportunities available to them in school, such as mentoring opportunities. And for that reason, these kinds of psychological strategies, although they're brief and powerful, pose no choice. There's no trade-off with structural resources and opportunities. We need both structural resources and opportunities, mentoring opportunities, and we need to address psychological issues that can prevent students from taking advantage of these. Third, these worries that students bring to college that they feel are reasonable responses to social reality. Whenever any of us goes into a setting where we're underrepresented, where we face a negative stereotype, it's very reasonable to ask yourself the question, what are people here going to think of me? Are people here going to like me? Are people here going to be glad I'm there? These worries are responses to the world that kids live in, and they're not kids' fault. We're building on this work now in a collaborative with 12 partner institutions, which will be launching these pre-matriculation interventions in the coming several years. And there's some big themes that I think are emerging. One theme is about the power of technology, not just for analytics and prediction, but the power of technology to combine with powerful psychological messages to drive social change on a large scale. These interventions are all delivered through technology online. And last, this gives us a real understanding of a new way to think about the sources of inequality. The reasons why we see inequality, it's not just because of the common accounts that we've heard for many years. It's also in part because disadvantage leaves its residue sometimes in the psychology of people and in how they understand situations, and we can, in some cases, address that directly to reduce some of its downstream consequences. Okay, so now we'll turn it over.
Okay. So first, are there any campuses that are doing this sort of work already, or is it mostly in the very preliminary stages? And you mentioned that, you can sort of build on the current academic advising that already exists. And how do you guys see this work as complementing that infrastructure?
I think in terms of colleges they're doing a great job, especially in terms of the student affairs side, in terms of orientation, having orientation groups designed to have programs to target the concerns and for first-generation college students. I think there are colleges I know colleges have student clubs that are also designed to help first-generation college students. Resident life, orientation sessions, student organizations. but that's still student affairs. I think what we find is that a lot of the academic affairs side of universities and colleges, if they want to control the curriculum, they usually are trying to control the former curriculum, but they're not doing, it doesn't appear that they're doing a very good job in terms of explicitly teaching about the hidden curriculum. So I think, once again, you could work with most colleges and universities. If they don't have a mentoring program, they have other academic support services and programs. So within those programs, if you restructure it in terms of having clear objectives, that some of the objectives of those programs would be to talk explicitly about the hidden curriculum or issues related to building social capital, I think that would be an ideal situation. But in terms of, as Greg mentioned, I think our intervention, the complexity of the achievement gap, there are multiple factors that contribute to the achievement gap, so we really have to apply multiple approaches to try to solve the achievement gap. And so I think online interventions should be implemented, whether it's video series. I know that the Heritage University, they do a very nice job in terms of having video, sort of a series on helping teachers actually address issues that's related to first-generation students. But then also, I think we do need to have those meaningful mentoring relationships, and that is a little more labor-intensive.
Yeah, we've been contacted by more than 100 post-secondary institutions that want to work with us in one capacity or another, and we're limited in how many we can work with to start, but there's a lot of interest.
And so I think in the online agenda for this session, initially it said that, or it posed the question of whether this kind of work was just coddling students. And I think especially in student affairs, there's been some questioning of, administrative bloat and is all this stuff necessary? And sounds like there's definitely a lot of interest. How are administrations responding to, requests for funding to do this kind of stuff? And how are campus officials that want to do it making their case?
When I went to college, the narrative was this kind of rah school spirit. That was the thing that happened. You went to your freshman dorm, and people were like, "Woohoo, we're here!" And you went to the football game, and in contrast, the messages that we give to students are negative in content. That is, we tell students that it's going to be hard at first, but you're going to be able to overcome those difficulties. And so when we ask students after our interventions, how much do you feel like you're going to belong when you first arrive on campus? Our interventions reduce that. They lead students to anticipate they'll belong less at first. And Yet, when we ask them, to what extent do you think you're going to belong in your sophomore year, there's no difference between conditions. So students become more realistic about understanding the ways that their experience will change over time in college. So it's not a self-esteem message. It's not a we're going to just pat you on the back. It's trying to give people really an understanding of what it's going to be like, that this is going to be a challenge. You're going to have to work hard. There's going to be difficulties, and there are ways that you can overcome those. That's part of your question, but not the other part.
Yeah. I guess I just think of, yes, you could use coddling, and it's kind of a negative term, or you could just consider it as providing support where it's needed, and that universities, if you think about what we just heard from our previous panel, they were clearly showing that the data says it's, paraphrasing, of course, what they said, it's cheaper to keep them, right, than to recruit them. And so if you think of interventions and mentoring as a means of trying to make sure you increase your retention, your overall graduation rate, overall satisfaction of your students, become happy alums, can be contributing alums. So I think universities are beginning to see, also in terms of change of demographics, that coddling or administrative bloat is it's something that you have to do in order to create not only an affirming, welcoming environment for first generation or underrepresented students, But if you create a university setting that's affirming and welcoming for those type of students, you will create a affirming and welcoming environment for all students. And I think they're beginning to see that message.
And so we're obviously, the country's in the midst of a big push to boost degree attainment. And there are certainly certain populations and certain institutions that serve students that would be especially, this kind of stuff is really beneficial for. So I'm curious, at Texas, they are now putting the whole incoming freshman class through some of the stuff that you were talking about, Greg. And would you guys like to see this kind of work really expanded to all students? Or, do you see it as more targeting those who could potentially benefit the most? So Texas is now delivering, and the private institution are both now delivering these interventions to all incoming students. They're randomizing students to different kinds of messages to try to learn what's best and make iterative improvements, but everybody's getting the basic messages. We don't know, however, yet two important things. One thing that we don't know is how well these messages work across a wider range of post-secondary institutions. And the second thing that we don't know is the extent to which we need to customize messages for different institutions to make them appropriate for those contexts and those populations, and thus effective for those contexts and those populations. And our collaborative is designed to help us answer both of those questions. And if the answers to those questions are continue to be promising, that is, if there continue to be positive effects and they seem to be robust in different institutions, then there comes a point at which it would be, I think, very problematic not to give students messages like this. Buffy, do you want to add anything? Oh, thanks. Okay, I think we're going to turn it over to audience questions.
I was going to just suggest a good story idea might be to look at institutions like community colleges that are trying to deal with the psychological stuff by having ceremonies. So for instance, at this time of year at elite colleges, there's a freshman convocation. And part of the message of that is you are a class, you're entering as a class, you will leave as a class. And typically, historically, many open access community colleges didn't have those. A lot are starting them. There's a movement in community colleges, and you can check if any of your local institutions are doing this, to have people sign graduation pledges. I will graduate. And so it's related, I think, to the things you're talking about, in that it's saying you can do it, it should be a goal, you're part of a cohort, sorts of messages that are have been more common at elite than open access institutions.
I had a question. I'm not a psychologist, but I'm wondering if, I think you're talking about UT and Stanford, if the school newspapers there wrote about this and said, you're going to hear messages that are going to tell you that you should, is that going to ruin it? Is there concern about that?
So there's it's a complicated issue and a complicated question. The messages are true, and they're given to students, and they represent different ways in which it's like to come to college, and it's important that becomes sort of part of the that people. It's important that people move from a kind of Hollywood image of what college is like, or a kind of image of college that's only rah rah rah, to a more sophisticated understanding of what it is like to go to college and what challenges you're likely to overcome. Now, at the same time, I think it would be very unhelpful for students to be told the reason why we're giving you this information is because we think you're a screw up and we want to prevent you from screwing up. And there's all sorts of ways to kill the value of that experience by the perceived intentions behind the message. So I think it's a complicated question. And there's a lot of subtleties here, and there are subtleties both in the ways in which we create these messages for students, and there's subtleties in which the ways in which these ideas are best talked about in public discourse. And we see this done well sometimes, and we see this done less well sometimes.
Yes, I wanted to engage both of the speakers with separate questions. For Buffy, this notion of mentoring being something for first-generation low-income students. I did a story a few years ago for U.S. News and World Report for the online supplement to their edition for best graduate schools. And that audience wasn't necessarily first-generation low-income. And it was clear to me from the way I was asked to write about the story that was the case. But I'm wondering, is there harm? Is it kind of counterproductive to refer to mentoring as something for one population when in fact mentoring is something beneficial for all students? Even if you're high flying, you still benefit from having a mentor, someone who's going down this path and can guide you towards success in your chosen field. So that would be the question for you. Then for I'm sorry, Greg, right? This notion of disadvantage, right? I heard you refer to the residue of disadvantage. Is it helpful, you think, to kind of reframe that? In other words, viewing disadvantage or coming from disadvantaged circumstances as an advantage. In other words, look, you've made it to college despite not having all of these things. So in other words, do you think there would be benefit to rethinking the notion of disadvantage? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And I just want to say I'm from Milwaukee, so you didn't have to make it a difficult question. But no. You're absolutely right. We all benefit from mentoring. The concept of mentoring is not used to be punitive. In relationship of using mentoring with underrepresented students is really to say that some of the information, knowledge, and the socialization process that many students might receive from their family or their immediate circle of friends that will help them thrive in college, that those first-generation students, since they don't have an immediate family member or someone in their immediate circle of friends who have attended college, who can talk about the culture, the college-going culture, it would be helpful to have an insider in the institution to serve as their cultural guide. So that's where I make the connection. But mentoring is a concept. Social capital is a concept. Surely you're successful reporters. I'm sure you also have mentors. It does not say that there's something deficient about you because you have a mentor. But in order to move and advance in our careers, we do need mentoring, right? So the concept is positive, right? But the reason why I think it's still a good concept to pair it with underrepresented students is to show that students are coming in with mentors. They might not be called mentors. They're called parents. They're called family members. They're called, some teachers will, based on perceived similarities, based on socially constructs of race or ethnicity or gender, social class, they're likely to take them under their wing and provide sponsorship for them. That's mentoring. And so I'm saying, well, some students are not getting that informally. So at least let's be honest to say other students are receiving it, mentoring, informally, and there are some students that need it, and we have to have a formalized process for them to receive that information. The same type of support or coddling that other students receive, they need to receive that support because they don't have it in an informal way.
Yeah, just before answering your second question, just to agree with Buffy, one of the things that we find is that majority group students report to us at the end of the year that they found a mentor, and majority group students do, many of them. Minority group students are less likely to, and one of the ways it seems that the interventions are effective is by increasing the likelihood that they tell us that they have in fact found a mentor on campus. Everybody needs mentorship at every stage of a career, and it's very hard to navigate college without that. And sometimes psychological barriers can prevent you from actually reaching out to other people to build those relationships. The word disadvantage, it's not a good word, and I totally agree that it's very important and valuable to talk about the ways in which diverse kinds of backgrounds give value to people's lives and give value to the contributions that they bring to diverse kinds of work in school settings. In this context, the word is defined by the presence of disparities in prior cohorts of students in things like graduation rates and GPA. But it's a problematic word for exactly, I think, the reasons you're honing in on.
Over here.
Hi. Kim Clark from Money. I've heard a lot of folks, especially in Silicon Valley, who are trying to come up with apps or little email programs that are supposed to do this at very low cost. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about whether you see any value in any of these technological solutions rather than what Buffy, you described as a very personal, hands-on solution.
I think of e-mentoring or can be effective, but I still think in terms of understanding the cultural nuances of a particular setting, social setting, I still think you need to have that personal one-on-one relationship. I think some information can be standardized, and that you can transmit that information via email or other forms of social media. But if you really want to understand what types of questions to pose in different situations, I don't know if that social media or email will be the proper sort of format to unveil that type of sort of hidden culture, whether it's in the university or if it's in your particular career. So I think I do see it as a supplement. I think once you certainly have a relationship with an individual, to maintain that relationship, certainly emails can work. But I think when you're certainly trying to establish a mentoring relationship, it seems to me the information that you can give through email, it still is, this is what you should do. So it has that sort of advising sort of cycle for me. For the apprenticeship, which I think happens more so with a personal relationship, it requires some type of, let me show you my approach of talking to my supervisor on this research project. And then you can intervene to say, no, Buff, that's not the best approach. That's not the best tone. This will, if you actually engage in this type of conversation, make sure you're mindful of your nonverbal expressions, you might get a better result. Versus just telling me over email, these are some of the key points you should cover in your conversation with your supervisor. So that's the part that I think is missing if you only rely exclusively on just online interventions or solely on apps for mentoring. But Greg,
all right, I think we're heading to dinner now. So thanks, everybody.